Tao of Jeet Kune, page number 18. I'm going to read the statement. I'm going to pause. If you have any reflection, please give it. Having totality means being capable of following what is, because what is constantly moving and constantly changing. If one is anchored in a particular view, one will not be able to follow the swift movement of what is.
With that reminds me of a quote a friend told me some years ago about what is or what is true, and the totality of what is a truth, as it is, what was true may not be true anymore. And with the martial arts, like what was relevant, 200 years ago or whatnot, might have been like sword was king, but now it's not even about swords. You would look ridiculous pulling out a sword in an actual fight, or with anything, trying to use a typewriter in the age of computers. You would look just asinine just trying to promote something like that.
Yeah, I think that's very true. But I think what I also notice is that like the government kind of superimposes their limit of what they want technology to be. Because I even remember like not too long ago, the government's like, all right, let's shut down the internet because it's messing up a lot of businesses. I remember them talking about that. And then the government, if you look at because I play Call of Duty, and you get all these like crazy guns, like these machine guns and like rocket launchers. I mean, the technology is there, but the government doesn't allow us to access that technology. So then people, they can't walk around with rocket launchers out there, So then they'll be like, all right, you can't have a revolver, a semi-automatic, and you can have an AR-15 under these circumstances, but you can't carry it out in the street. You can have a shotgun, but you can't carry it out in the street. Like the government superimposes what their limitation would be, and in a way, we're kind of subjected to that limitation if we want to be law-abiding citizens.
Right.
Because I mean, if the government didn't, if the government allowed us to carry around swords, I'm sure there'd be some people that would carry it around. I would, but they don't allow you to, so then, what are we left with? Pocket knives. I mean, because if you think back in the day, samurai, imagine like a samurai came up with a pocket knife to fight against like the real samurai with the real swords, So I think a lot of it is the law and them deciding what will be allowed and what won't be allowed. And different countries have different laws, and from what I know Japan is a lot more strict with their gun bans, so they don't really have guns in their country. I think even the police officers don't have guns, So then, like when it comes to a killing spree, recently I read that, somebody went like on a stabbing spree, just started killing people with a knife, And then not too long ago, I saw an article where somebody in Toronto killed 3 people with a crossbow. Like you don't hear about that too often,
No.
So I think, but yeah, I mean, this teaching is talking about being able to change with change, and things are moving, like you said. I mean, using a typewriter during this time wouldn't really be too, wouldn't be too practical. And it's the same thing with combat. It's just that so many different ways of people hurting you. Now people are using like bombs and stuff like that too. So
yeah, my father-in-law, he brought up, he's like, why would you need an AR-15? Like, let's say guerrilla warfare, he like, the government has drones, right? I'm like, well, you got a point, there's no competing with that, but still,
Yep. Alright, next one. Whatever one's opinion of hooking and swinging as part of one's style, there cannot be the least argument to acquiring perfect defenses against it. Indeed, nearly all natural fighters use it. As for the martial artist, it adds versatility to his attack. He must be able to hit from wherever his hand is.
Did you read just the first part again?
Whatever one's opinion of hooking and swinging as part of one's style, there cannot be the least argument to acquiring perfect defenses against it.
Okay. From that, what I'm hearing, and I may be wrong, it kind of sounds like whatever you use or whatever's useful for you, there can be nothing perfect against it. You know, you have to use what's available to you. Like, that's part of your style. Like, there's nothing, I mean, it's not absolute, but there's something useful there, like cooking. Like, some people will look at it like, oh, it's irrelevant, like, you know, distance-wise, you know, why would you use something like that? But everybody uses it, and there's nothing wrong if it's useful for you. You got to use what's at hand for you.
Yeah, I think that statement alone, I think he's directly criticizing the Wing Chun style, the system. Like, directly criticizing without actually saying Wing Chun.
Right.
And who knows, he might have even said Wing Chun, but then the editor just eliminated it because he didn't want to create like controversy or whatnot.
Possibly.
But I know in the Wing Chun system, they're like against hooks, you know, like, so he's like what he does say is really makes sense. He's like, you know, nearly all natural fighters use it. So people that don't know how to fight will usually throw like wild hooks, and you need to be a great martial artist, you need to know the perfect defense against it, you know. And if you're limited, and say somebody says, okay, you can only jab and cross, you're not allowed to hook, then you just have less versatility, and then you become less effective because you just have less options.
Right.
So the more options that you have, the more versatile you are, just like he's saying, you know, then you're gonna be better at what you do, you know. So you must be able to hit from wherever your hand is. So yeah, straight line attacks are extremely effective, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't hook, like, ever, you know.
Right, that one moment where that could be, you know, it's like that could be the best option.
Yeah.
Just that one moment, it's like we'll never hook. Like, this is the opportunity to do it.
Yeah. Could you shut the door? Okay, next one. But in classical styles, system becomes more important than the man. The classical man functions with the pattern of a style.
I'm probably paraphrasing what I just heard, but does it say that the style becomes more important than the man?
Yeah.
Okay. That kind of, again, it kind of just gets me to think of something that happened yesterday trumps what now. You know, it's like, well, the traditions of yesterday, what was appropriate then, like, well, why are you wearing that coat? It's 80 degrees outside, like, it's not relevant. But
Yeah.
today's style, like, you know, nobody can, you know, nobody probably does kicks anymore. Or, right, nobody does kicks anymore, but that was probably the style back 20 years ago. Or, you know, like boxing. Boxing is kind of on its way out. The whole thing is like MMA, and everybody's doing kicks now. You know, nobody's really perfecting the art of boxing or giving it that much attention. So that's what's in style. So maybe it's the style is trumping, or the tradition sometimes gets in the way of being natural, being free, you know, being honest, holding on to something. That's what I'm hearing.
This one gets me to compare it to like businesses, corporations. So when he says classical styles, to me that's representing like a corporation, like where you're working, for example. And then it's like system becomes more important. Classical styles, system becomes more important than man, as he's like saying. And then he's saying like basically, you know, like a lot of companies, they might not care about you, they just care about the company.
Right, the
and then
bottom line.
yeah, and then you're like stuck in there working, and then you forgot about your own happiness. and your own being, and just you're just stuck in the system, and then the company becomes more important than you. You're basically just a number.
Right.
And then like they don't care who you are. You could be easily replaced.
Right.
And then it's like you lost your soul, you lost your spirit, and then you lost your sense of happiness and who you are. And Bruce Lee's talking about like being who you are, happy with who you are, you know, finding your own self. He's talking about more of the spiritual side, but in a way we could still say that, well, it's going to be hard to, you know, find happiness in life if you don't find employment. So there has to be that type of balance, like between system and the individual, you know.
Right.
So
I mean, I hear, well, from you putting it that way, I didn't hear it the way you heard it, but just a reflection on your interpretation, it kind of gets me to thinking like some people might find happiness in a system or style to where, you know, like quote JFK, you know, not what your country can do for you, but actually what can you do for your country. I always love that that quote, because it's like, well, sometimes people find, you know, how can you be part of something greater than yourself? You can't necessarily, and not you per se, I'm just saying us as people, sometimes the greatest achievements of our lives isn't really about us, it's what we did, what we came together to do.
yeah, and you know, I see that, you know, and I think, like we're talking about earlier, like back in Bruce's time, I think there's too much style, too much system, and then he needed to show the beauties of like individuality. But now I think we've come to the point where it's too much about us and not about family. Because you see like a lot of families broken up and relationships crumble, a lot of divorces, and it's just like people can't work at a place more than like a couple of years. They just keep jumping from job to job, and combat sports all about the individual. It's not about teamwork, you know.
Right.
And it's just, I think we're living in a time where we have to learn to appreciate the other side of it, you know, like the system side of it, or like the family side of it, where you work together, and you could find happiness in working together. Because I mean, like when he talks about system, yeah, if there's like if this is a school with 10,000 people, 10,000 students, 20,000 students, there's a disconnect. Like there's no, you know what I'm saying? Like you walk in there, it's just like nothing. Like nobody, you know, you're just another number. Just like walking to the regular gym, they don't even care who you are. You know, you know. But when you come into something like here, where it's like only like a few of us, like a handful of us, like we each get to know each other and develop a bond. That's a system, but it's a smaller system. You know, it's like a smaller, close-knit family, and there's definitely benefits to connection with other people. Even like getting married, or even just being with one woman is already times two, just rather than just you know.
Right.
And so, and then when you have kids, it just gets a little bit more than that. So I think it's just that balance of finding like not too many people where it becomes disconnected, but then just by yourself alone, I mean, that's fine too, you know, but I think having a small, close-knit family is not bad either, you know.
Right.
So how can there be methods and systems to arrive at something that is living? To that which is static, fixed, dead, there can be a way, a definite path, but not to that which is living. Do not reduce reality to a static thing and then invent methods to reach it.
That reminds me of a quote I always say. Why would you, well, the quote I always say is, why make simple complicated? I say it to my wife all the time. I don't know where I heard it from, but I always think that. And that reminds me of what Bruce just said when he's like, well, why would you use something static towards something dead to try to reach something that's alive? Like, there's so many different ways to get to a certain place. Why would you limit yourself to one? You know, kind of like a math equation. There's different ways to get the same answer in doing math, but oh, this is the only way, 2 plus 2 equals 4. It's like, well, there's multiple ways to get to the number 4, but you don't have to use this dead same thing. There's no life in it. It's kind of like, I would think in life in general, like some people, like, oh, you have to do this, or you have to go to college, or you have to travel the world before you this, or you have to date all these women before you get married. And it's like, no, wow. You know, everybody's life is different. That might not be your situation. You know, that might be the worst thing for a particular person, to do something that somebody else did before them and work for somebody else.
Yeah, he's just talking about how important it is to focus on the living rather than the dead. The dead is like the static, and that's what a lot of we do that a lot, like focus on traditions and dead people, dead things, and sometimes people appreciate dead things more than they do living things. So it's almost like a real living plant or flower compared to, like, you know, something plastic and not alive and
Right.
non-living, you know.
A lot of plants dying and the plastic ones getting all the fashion.
You know, just focus on living things, like your living friends and family, even animals and dogs and cats and birds and plants and like water, like things that are living. But dead things, like, you know, corpses in the cemetery, you know, like plastic fake things. And you know, I just think the way of nature, like get closer to nature and be in tune with nature, you know. So when he put in the context of sparring or fighting, it's like a living thing, a living person. He could just respond. He could just all of a sudden just do something completely like unplanned or spontaneous that you might not have been prepared for because you have been training against dead things. So it's basically like sparring with a human, opposed to just like working with a punching bag or a wooden dummy. Like, they're not living, you know, they can't really respond back. But when you got a living person trying to, you know, do certain techniques or moves or responses, you got to respond to the living thing, you know, because the person, you know, can pull out a knife or a gun out of nowhere, and then all of a sudden, you know, the dynamics of the combat situation change, like, immediately.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're right. You know, if somebody's on the street and it's like, all right, you know, somebody been trained in years in one style or tradition, and they're like, yeah, I'm ready for anything. Like you said, somebody pulls out a knife, that changes everything.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like, what do I do now? Like, you weren't ready for it because you're so fixed. It's like you got to be ready for this person. Heck, even mace, a knife, multiple offenders.
Yeah. You know, or just like the things that have been happening, you know, like somebody shoots up a movie theater or a mall and you just happen to be there, you know, like just being prepared for like certain circumstances that really most people might not associate with the martial arts, but it's a part of it, you know, just being prepared for what might happen. Or just like simple things like not knowing how to swim, but then you're in a situation where you have to save your life by swimming, you know what I'm saying? Or your child is drowning and then you want to help your child, but then you don't know how to swim type thing, you know what I mean? Like stuff where anything could happen and then you got to be prepared to handle the situation. Or even when you're riding your bike and, you know, a car is coming by and then they might try to run you off the road, or, you know, just having to be prepared for situations that are not like the common one-on-one fighting against somebody type thing, you know. Alright, so that's good. We'll end it there.